Welcome everyone to a brand new episode of the Theatre Thoughts podcast. I'm very excited to have my guest on today. We have a producer who has worked across many aspects of the entertainment industry for over 35 years. She's created Neglected Musicals in 2010 and has presented 25 musicals of the genre over the past 13 years. With over 20 years as one of Australia's leading entertainment publicists, she's worked and managed the media for people such as Cyndi Lauper, Barry Humphries, the Dalai Lama, Cats, The Graduate, The Phantom of the Opera, Guys and Dolls, Bernadette Peters, Kristin, Chenoweth, the Helpman Awards and more. Michelle Guthrie, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you on, to have a chat, because you have such a wealth of experience under you, and I'm sure you have so many stories that we could get into.
So many stories.
Excellent. I want to say thank you, first of all, for jumping on, because I remember the very first day you jumped into my sphere, and it was when I lived back in my old little terrible one-bedroom apartment, and I was on the verge of shutting down Theatre Thoughts because I was like, this isn't important, no one's listening, it's too hard. And I got a phone call just from this random number, and you were like, oh, hi, I'm Michelle Guthrie, I'm just wanting to know a little bit more about Theatre Thoughts. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course, I'd love to tell you more about Theatre Thoughts. And then you would just like open arms sort of welcome me into the Hayes Theatre with all the shows. And like, can you do this, and introduce me to people, and it's just kind of gone from there. So, I mean, it's a massive thank you from me.
Because we need you. The industry needs you and people like you. It's really important that what this industry is doing is covered by people like you. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. But you're on to talk about Neglected Musicals. Mm-hmm. You have one coming up, and then you have a whole bunch coming up in future projects. Mm-hmm. Now, the cast for the one coming up, If Then, which plays in November, is stellar.
Isn't it?
It is stellar cast that you have on there. So we'll get into that in a bit, but I'd love to talk about you first. So I guess for people who don't know you, I know I said a bit of a bio just then, but I'd love to know, like, what are the best things to know about Michelle?
The best things to know about me is that I love this industry with a passion, this business we call show, and I guess that's why I've always been here, and I've gone from one thing to another. I change, I guess, reinvent myself every now and again, but it's such a joy to be part of this business, and I am very lucky that I am still here.
Yeah, I think I spoke to other producers recently who've said the exact same thing. You know, to be lucky to be still here. I'd love to know, what do you mean by that? Like, is it a tough industry in terms of, you know, working as a producer, like finding the next project, or is it kind of keeping that passion sort of alive?
It's definitely not about keeping the passion alive, because I think people who even turn their back on it still have the passion and have to hide themselves from the industry because it's difficult to see it and not be part of it. And I was thinking about somebody last night who did that a long time ago, and I miss her. I miss this person. I wish she was still part of the industry, but I completely understand why she's not here anymore.
Yeah, right.
But I think the reason why people like myself are grateful to still be here is because we've seen lots of people walk away. And I knew that with the pandemic, a lot of people will go, okay, that's it. Yeah. I can't do this anymore on every level. And we did see that. We did see people go, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And it is a tough industry, but it's pretty relentless as well, but it's also a big commitment. And if there's other things you want to do with your life, then, you know, dedicating yourself to this industry can be difficult.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, you've worked with so many people over the years, you know, like as I listed off a couple then, and that must be rewarding in itself.
Yes, but it's, you know, as I said to you before, it is work though.
Yeah, definitely.
There's no question. You're not, when you're looking after people like that, you're not, well, okay, sometimes you might be having a drink with them at the bar, but on the whole, you know, you are working and you are doing a job for them and their promoter, and you're getting it done. But you do walk away with a lot of really interesting stories about these people. And of course, some of these people I have stayed in touch with over the years. And then there's a lot of people we have, like one of the most wonderful experiences of looking after somebody and working with someone was Hal David.
Oh, right.
And he and his wife came out a little over 20 years ago, and of course he's passed away now. And just to be with him for a few days, he was in his early 80s, and the way he talked about his life in the Brill Building and the songs, and it was a joy for me to listen to that and to be with him. And we were sitting waiting to go on to Bert Newton's morning show.
Oh, yeah.
And they were playing as a kind of go out to the break when we come back kind of thing. Raindrops Keep Falling on Your Head.
Yeah.
And so he started singing along with it, and then he nudged me to sing with him.
Oh, no way.
And so I did.
Yeah.
So I got to sing with Hal David, in the alleyway under the stairs before you go on.
That's so cool.
So that was lovely. He and his wife were so lovely, and they were so lovely to me, so those experiences are fantastic.
Yeah, I bet. And I'd love to. I want to jump into some a little bit later in the podcast, because I know before we started, you were talking like you already had some, and I was like, oh my god, save this for the episode. But I'd love to ask you first of all our 1 minute theatre thoughts questions, and get a little bit more to know like your aspects of theatre, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, cool. So we'll start with the first one. What has been your favourite production you've seen recently?
Recently?
Yeah.
Beetlejuice.
Did you see that?
Yeah, in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And it was, I just went on my own, and I didn't really know what to expect. I had listened to it, but I didn't really have any memory of it. And I was blown away. I was like, this is a great show.
Wow.
And it's coming to Australia,
yes,
so that's great.
So excited for it.
And the audience really loved it, and there were teenagers dressing up, and I just was, I was really impressed.
I find that fascinating because it's an old film.
Yeah.
And I mean, I loved the film itself, but it's an old Tim Burton film, and I think it's got this TikTok generation audience,
sure,
which I find fascinating. But I think that's part of its popularity as well.
Well, there were definitely people there that were bringing their teenagers and quietly standing in a corner while their teenager was just loving being in the foyer and buying the merchandise, as they're happy to be there. But also, what was great about that experience for me was that it was a very well-behaved audience. And
nice.
I don't know if you've been to the Pantages in Los Angeles. It's going to be really hit and miss. People are bussed in. It's not like Broadway.
Yeah.
They were a very well-behaved audience. There were no phones out. There was no, at the end of every scene, people getting up and going to the bathroom. It was such a great room to be in as well, because they knew the show better than me.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm so excited to see it in Melbourne. Name a play or a production that left you speechless.
Well, I think, with questions like that, the answer is usually something you saw when you were younger, when you can still be affected in that way.
Yeah.
And it probably would have been absolutely everything I ever saw. But you really can't get past that original production of Les Mis.
Yeah, right. Okay.
And I was lucky enough to see it a few times in the first month.
Yeah.
And it's gobsmacking. It was gobsmacking. It's just that particular production, and of course the show's very different now. I took my daughter to see it at the Pantages in Los Angeles recently. It is a different show now.
Yeah.
So for those of us that were lucky enough to see that original production and that original Australian production with that cast, that absolutely affected me and blew me away.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think mine was I saw Oklahoma in the West End, and I'd never seen
which one?
The new one, the adapted one. Because I've never seen Oklahoma. I know obviously Hugh Jackman did the West End version, and I was like,
never seen Oklahoma.
Oh no, never seen it because it wasn't. My friends told me about it. And I was like, I don't really think that's for me. And so when I was watching,
it's Oklahoma.
Yeah, I know. It's like it
changed everything.
Yeah, and it was like this Rodgers and Hammerstone. So I'm like, I get it, it's Oklahoma. And I went to see this in the West End, and I felt like I was watching two productions. I felt like I was trying to dissect the original Oklahoma, but then also how they've changed it. And what they did with it was, it left me speechless because it was like sexy, it was dark, it was like really unsettling in parts, and I thought it was a really fascinating way to take like a show that some people say is outdated, but making it so relevant still.
Right.
And I was left speechless by it, honestly.
Well, hopefully we'll get that version of the show here.
I hope
soon.
so. I
Yeah.
hope so, because it's great. Okay, sorry, I went off a tangent then. What is a dream show you'd love to tackle? I guess it kind of
forgot about that
neglected
one.
musicals as well. Kind of could feed into that, I suppose.
Well, I would have said City of Angels. See, but of course it's been done now. But with Neglected, it's very difficult to do a show within a show, and you'd be surprised how many there are.
Okay.
And City of Angels is kind of like a show within a show
Yeah.
to symbolise the two different worlds in a neglected format would be difficult. I mean, another one is Me and Juliet, where it's people putting on a show, and when they're already walking around with scripts in their hand, it's a bit difficult to go, oh, now they're rehearsing the other show with scripts in their hands. So,
Right.
But yeah, no, I think all shows I would like to tackle. There's not one particularly. Like, I'm really glad that we're finally getting around to playing our song next year. So,
Yeah.
that's exciting. But they're all exciting.
Yeah.
Shows.
I love that you still get so excited for it. It's great. Do you have, or what is your all-time favourite musical? Is it Les Mis?
Les Mis,
Yeah.
but also Into the Woods.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
it's a
yeah.
tie. I can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Les Mis and Into the Woods. And if I had to go a third, Sunday in the Park with George.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
That's a great one as well.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And then last one, which I love asking producers, which production would you most want to see come to Australia?
Yeah, this is really tricky. I mean, I'd really love to see the gender swap company.
Yes.
And,
yes.
and I believe
Yes.
that is coming.
Oh,
so we
fingers
will get to
crossed.
see that. I think that's just always about timing
Yeah.
with stuff like that.
Yeah.
All the Sometimes.
Yep.
All the Sometimes, including the new one. I would love that to eventually come. I think Hadestown,
Yes.
I did see it on Broadway. I think it's a tricky one to do here. I think that it probably suits a state theatre company. It's a really amazing production. Have you seen it?
I missed it. I didn't get to see it, but
Right.
I've listened to the soundtrack on repeat. It's on like the top of my I wish list.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really quite remarkable.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that it won the Tony, because it's only with that kind of support behind it could it have lasted as long as it has
Right,
on
gotcha.
Broadway. I feel like a lot of those really good shows need that support of, Tony winner in order to get the people from the sticks to go.
Yeah,
Sorry,
definitely.
people from the sticks.
They'll come. Come, please. Well, I'd love to jump back to something you said before about Sondheim. So you love Sondheim. So I'd love to know, what is it about Sondheim's shows that, you're drawn to?
Well, I think for some of us well, I don't know if you know this, but like the PBS in America filmed a whole lot of Broadway shows that they put on PBS, which was like the ABC. So therefore, by the 80s, there were video cassettes that people would lend to each other of Into the Woods and Sunday in the Park with George, and the documentary about the recording of Company.
Right.
That we would just watch and watch and watch and watch. So therefore, we got to completely know these shows, to fall in love with these shows. And in the end, for some of us, it's like the gospel according to Sondheim.
Yeah,
because
right.
His words, his wisdom, the way he would present life to us was nothing like anything we'd ever seen before.
Yeah.
So it spoke to me, especially the emotional intelligence of it all. Something popped up on my phone this morning from Sunday in the Park with George, and I instantly teared up. It's just, where she goes to George and says she's leaving, and it's just such a remarkable part of the show. And not only Sondheim can do it, but Sondheim does it so well.
He does, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, speaking of those tapes, because I was listening and I was like, yeah, no, I know, because the other night, me and Marty, my producer, watched Tick, Tick, Boom. He'd never seen it, and it's one of my favourite films. And there's a
Right.
scene in it where Jonathan Larson's watching Sunday in the Park with George on PBS because they'd recorded it.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep, that's right. So even and then he makes a little cameo in the movie as well. And I think Sondheim's just one of those names in theatre that will forever just be attached to, synonymous with it
The
in a
king.
way. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a loss, really. you know, but also what he left for us.
Well, exactly. I mean, we were very lucky to have him for so long.
Yeah,
really,
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. That was a great insight into your theatrical sphere. So I'd love to jump back to you and your career before we talk about neglected musicals. So you've worked with so many people. You know, like I said before, Cyndi Lauper, the Dalai Lama, Kristin Chenoweth, Bernadette Peters. Is there any stories that pop out in your head as something that's like really memorable, or you've told like countless times as your go-to story?
Look, there's the ones that, you know, you'll get if you come to a dinner party at my house, and then there's the nice ones.
Yeah.
Look, on the whole, everybody's pretty lovely. Kristin Chenoweth was particularly wonderful.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like really, really lovely and really down to earth. And such a fabulous performer and just so generous. You know, there's that bit she does in a show where she gets up somebody to sing for good with her. And I had been approached by Chris Horsey saying,